Father, I just lift up each one of these prayer requests, and I pray right now that you honor them, and I pray that as later on we go here and pray for them, that you just open up our eyes to what you want us to see also out of this message we have today in 1 Corinthians 9, Lord. And I just pray you speak through me. I just praise your name, amen. Mm-hmm. We're in 1 Corinthians 9. He starts out, am I not an apostle? Am I not free? Haven't I seen Jesus Christ our Lord? Are you not my workers in the Lord? If I am not an apostle to others, yet doubtless I am to you, for you are sealed of the apostleship and the lordship. So here's Paul. He's saying, they're questioning whether he's an apostle or not, aren't they? And he's telling them, I'm an apostle. And they're like, how can we be sure of this? And we're going to get into a little more detail why they were questioning it.
Because they heard about his past, probably.
No. Actually, they'll doubt it again here in 2 Corinthians 2. But it comes a little bit later on this chapter why they were questioning whether he's an apostle or not. Because he goes, for if I'm not an apostle, could I be speaking to you guys? Would you guys even be saved? There wouldn't be any seal at all. If he's not an apostle, how can they get saved? So he's asking that he's telling them that. But they were really questioning it back then. Then he's going to go on. My defense to those examining me is this. Do we have not the right to eat and drink? Do we not have the right to take along a believer and a believing wife? And do also as apostle, the brothers of the Lord Cephas? Or is it only Barnabas and I who have no rights to refrain from working? Whoever goes to war at his own expense. We plant vineyards and does not eat of its fruit, or when tending his flock and does not drink of milk or flock. Do I say these things as a mere man, or does not the law say the same thing? For it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain. It is ox that God is concerned about. Or does he say it altogether for our sake? For our sake, no doubt, this is written, that he who plows should plow in hope, and he who thrests in hope shall be partakers of it, his hope. And we have sown spiritual things for you. It is a great thing if we reap the material things. If also other partakers of this right over you, are we not even more? Nevertheless, we have not used this right, but endure all things, lest we hinder the gospel of Christ. So, what he's talking about, if you're an apostle, right, you're allowed to eat. It is the church job really to take care of you, isn't it? Now, Paul did take money from other churches, but he wouldn't take money from the churches where he was working at. When he was going into Corinth and working at different churches, he wouldn't take money. So they were questioning him because the other apostles would come, and when they came, like he says, it's our defense to eat and drink. I mean, it was their job to do it, feed them. If you have a wife, isn't it the church's job, the brothers of the Lord, to take care of them? Yeah. Cephas and all them guys, they were all doing this. They were all having the churches take care of them. They were financially supported. But no, Paul and Barnabas, guess what? They didn't want to bother them. So they weren't taking any money. They were leaving it alone. They didn't want any. They were tent makers. Paul was a tent maker. That's why he was making his money. So he was working and giving the gospel. Because he even goes on, he goes, you go to war. You don't go at your own expense, do you? They don't make you go out and buy your own tank. They don't make you to go out and buy your own gun, do they? I mean, no, they don't do that, do they?
It's probably gonna happen sooner or later.
What? No, but they don't make you go out and buy your own stuff.
No.
Our military, our government pays for it, don't it?
Yep.
If you're in a vineyard, you're allowed to eat the fruits there, don't you? A lot of people eat them. If you're tending a flock, you're allowed to drink the milk. If you're taking care of goats and that out in the field, you're allowed to drink the milk.
Don't forget where it says in the Bible about if you own a vineyard, if you own a field, you're supposed to leave so much for the poor.
Yep. But this is where he was going though. They were upset that he wasn't taking any money off them. So they were questioning whether he was actually an apostle or not because he wouldn't take any finances off them. And here he's actually confirming that they should be paying him. Because he even goes in, he says, it says in verse 9, for it is written in the law, Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox while he treads out the grain. Is oxen God is concerned about? God even made sure the oxen were taking care of that. If they were treading the grain, they didn't put a muzzle on them, they let them eat it. Because they'd be working all day long. And this is coming out where he's saying, and he goes in verse 11, if we have sown spiritual things for you, it is a great thing if we reap the material things. If others are partaking of this right over you, are we not even more? Nevertheless, we have not used the right, but endure all things, lest we hinder the gospel of Christ. He was sitting there like, we have the right to take what you want, what money from you. We can take an offering, expect you guys to give money, but we're not going to do that. He says, because we don't want to hinder the gospel. What was he talking about the chapter before when Scott was here? They were actually talking about food, weren't they? Should you eat food to an idol? This goes back almost to the same thing. Because this is where he was talking about, there in Corinth, you'd have wise men come.
Well, that was the symbolism that he was trying to bring across from the Pharisees and the Sadducees.
Yeah, but it was making people stumble.
Yeah.
He says, if it makes somebody stumble, don't do it, didn't he?
Yep.
Okay, this is what he's afraid of is going to happen here. Because what was happening in Corinth is people would come there, very wise people, and they'd talk to people, and then they'd say, now if you want to know a little bit more, give me some money. And then they'd take them and teach them off the side. So who was the only ones that were able to be taken care of? If you were wealthy. If you're poor, what happened?
You got left.
You got left behind, didn't you?
Yep.
It's almost like college today. When I was thinking about it, if you don't have the money to go to college, you're out of luck, aren't you? Mm-hmm. Well, back then, if you didn't have the money to have the wise man give you information on doing stuff, he wouldn't talk to you. So this is what he was getting at. Was that if he would have done that, would it made some of the people that are poor stumble?
Yes.
It would have made some of the rich stumble, because the rich people would have thought, boy, I'm a lot smarter than you. I know more than you. I have more wisdom. Paul didn't want that. So he went without pay. He worked his way through. He did his own work, so nobody could say, you have to do this or you have to do that. He didn't want that.
He was a tent maker, so
Well, he was a tent maker, and that's what he did for a living, but his big thing is he didn't want somebody taking the gospel the wrong way. Mm-hmm. So instead of having them support him, He just came in and preached. Do we have churches now we do that with? We support missionaries that do that, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
We send them to areas. And that. This is what he was doing, so people didn't think the gospel wasn't for everybody. He wanted them to know that it was for everybody. He didn't want it to cause it to be a stumbling block. Like he says, I don't eat for food. If people think I shouldn't eat food to that idol, if it makes them stumble, I didn't eat it. Even though it was right for him to do, he didn't do it. Here's another example where it would be right for him to take the money, but he's not doing it because he didn't want to see other people stumble. And this is one of the big things with him. He says, he goes back in verse 13. Do you not know that those who minister in the holy things eat of the things of the temple, and those who serve in the altar partake of the offering at the altar? Even so, the Lord has commanded that those who preach the gospel should live from the gospel. But I have used nothing of these things, nor have I written these things that I should be done so to me. For it would be better for me to die than that anyone should make me my boasting void. For I preach the gospel, I have nothing to boast for necessity is laid upon me. Yes, woe is me if I do not preach the gospel. For if you do it willingly, I have a reward. But it's if against my will I have been entrusted with the stewardship. What is my reward then? That when I preach the gospel, I may present the gospel of Christ without charge, that I may not abuse my authority in the gospel. For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win more. And to the Jews I became as the Jews, and I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, that I might win those who are under the law. So here Paul was talking about his preaching. He says, I boast about nothing about my preaching. He has nothing to boast about. He says, for I do this willingly, and I have a reward, but it's against my will. He's doing it willingly, but he says it's against his will to do. He says he's a servant. When you're a servant, when your boss tells you to do something, can you complain about it?
No. You shouldn't, but you can.
No, they wouldn't let you complain back then.
No.
So he's saying he's a servant to God. So he's doing whatever God tells him. Not complaining. He just does it. And what happens when you give yourself away is when you tell, back then when you were a servant for somebody, you said, I'll live with you as long as you give me food, shelter, you take care of my family. And you did whatever that person said to do. That's what he's saying he's doing. He's saying, I'm going in and I'm serving. I don't care. Whatever God tells me to do, I'm doing it. But he's not doing it in his own will. Now, how many times are we willing to sacrifice that much for God? Are we willing to do what God tells us? Are we willing to put him first without complaining and everything? Because this is what he's talking about. This is what he's doing. And he says he's a servant. He says, for though I am free from all men, I have myself a servant, that I might win the more. So he's talking about what the end's going to be like, isn't he? But then he started in verse 20, he says, and to Jews I became a Jew, that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without law, as without law, not being without law towards God, but under law towards Christ, that I might win those who are without law. To the weak I became as weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, that I might be all means, save some. Now this I do for the gospel's sake, that I might be partaking of it with you. So what did he do? When he went into different cultures, what did he act like?
Like he did.
He acted like them, didn't he? And this is what we're called to do in the gospel too, because what's our people like in our church and stuff like that? That's the way you do services, don't you? You wouldn't go in the inner city church and do service the same as we do, would you? Some of the inner churches in the cities, they dance in the aisles, everything. They get up and clap. And is that what happens here?
No.
That's what the culture is, though. So, what's he being like? When he's with the Jews, he's like a Jew. When he's with the Gentiles, what's he act like?
A Gentile.
He fits in. That don't mean he. Now, I like the best one, like they say about Jesus. Jesus ate with the sinners, but he didn't sin with the sinners. Paul was being part of their. He was in the world, but he was not of the world. He wasn't doing the same thing as them. He wasn't partaking of the sins. But he was there.
He was living out the example that he was showing to them. So
Yes.
to see that personally.
So he was living like them, but he was living an example of what you had to do as a Christian. That's what we need to do, isn't it? Mm-hmm. We need to be in the world. That means we're not a separate club. And that's the hard thing. Because a lot of churches want to separate themselves from the world. But are we called to do that? We're not. We're called out to go out and reach the sinners, aren't we? And then he goes into, you know that those who run a race all run, but one receives the prize. Race in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for that prize is tempted in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we do it for an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty that I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection. At least now when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified. So what's he doing? When you go to a race, now do you just walk in and race?
Oh,
You have to prepare for it, don't you? You slowly build up to that. If you're running a 5K, most people aren't going to be able to go out here, start out here and run a 5K, are they?
Nope.
You have to train up to that. You have to do training. And if you want to win, that means you have to really hard train, don't you? That means every day you train hard. That's what we're supposed to do in our Christian life. You got people who do that for, what do they get? A perishable crown. You get a perishable prize for doing it, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
And I see people that'll take their whole life dedicated to that, big time. Sports and that, just to get a prize, just to be known. Why aren't we doing that with our Christian life? We know what our prize is at the end. We got a non-perishable crown. We should be really fighting for it, shouldn't we? We should be really be subjecting our body and everything to bring that across. He's telling these guys, you know. He's saying, you got to be like them. Sometimes is that easy?
No, it's not easy.
He's given up, like he says, he could have them pay for him and everything. Why he's not doing it, is he?
Nope.
He wants to see that crown given to him. He says, you know, I'm going to give up what I could be doing by having you guys pay me. because I don't want people to be left out. His thing is mainly is, how do I get the message across to help others? Why? How do I get it so I can go and bring people to Christ? And that's what he's trying to get through to these guys. Because they were having questions. And he didn't want to make anybody stumble either. So that's why he goes on. If you're doing something to your brother, it's going to make your brother stumble, don't do it. Help him grow. Even though it's okay for you to do. So, let's go to prayer.